There's a moment during a late-night traffic stop when everything feels a little more intense than usual. The lights hit your mirrors, the road is quiet, the officer walks up slower, more observant, less conversational, and before you even realize it, the stop isn't just about driving anymore. It's about something deeper, because when an officer suspects impaired driving, the entire interaction changes. The questions change, the tone changes, even the way they look at you changes. And most drivers don't notice it happening. They think it's still just a normal stop, right up until they've already said too much. So let me ask you something honestly. If you were pulled over late at night and an officer suspected you might be under the influence, would you recognize the signs early enough to protect yourself, or would you unknowingly walk straight into every step of their process? I want you to answer that in the comments, because this is where most people realize they've never actually thought about it. And what I'm about to explain is not about encouraging anything illegal. It's about understanding exactly how these stops work, so you don't make mistakes that follow you long after that night ends. Because once a DWI investigation begins, everything you say and do matters more than you think. Let's get into it. The first thing you need to understand is that officers don't usually jump straight into accusing you of anything. They build it, step by step. And the very first trick, if you want to call it that, is something so simple. Most people fall for it instantly. It's the casual conversation. The officer walks up and says something like, "Hey, how's it going tonight? Where are you coming from? Where are you headed?" It feels friendly, harmless, almost like small talk, but it's not random. Every one of those questions is designed to do two things at the same time: gather information and observe how you respond. Are you speaking clearly? Do your answers make sense? Do you hesitate? Do you contradict yourself? And here's where people make their first mistake. They start talking freely. They explain everything. "I just came from a friend's house. I was out for dinner. I had a couple drinks earlier, but I'm fine." And just like that, they've given the officer a direction. Because now the stop is no longer just about your driving. Now there's a reason to look deeper. So what should you do? You stay calm, you stay respectful, but you stay controlled. You don't need to lie. You don't need to argue. You simply don't volunteer unnecessary details, because once you open that door, it doesn't close easily. Now let's move to the second tactic, and this is where observation becomes more focused. The officer starts looking for physical signs. They may shine a light into the vehicle. They may ask you to hand over your license and watch how steady your hands are. They may pay attention to your eyes, your face, your movements. And here's the key detail. They're not just looking at what you do. They're looking at how you do it. Are your movements smooth or shaky? Do you fumble with your wallet? Do you avoid eye contact or overcompensate? None of these things prove impairment on their own, but together, they build a picture, and that picture influences what happens next. Now here's the third tactic, and this is where things start to feel more direct. The transition question. At some point, the officer will ask something like, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" This is a turning point, because now the question is no longer casual, it's specific, and most people feel pressure in that moment. They think they need to answer in a way that sounds honest, but also safe. So they say things like, "Just one," "only earlier," "nothing recently." But here's the problem. Any admission, even a small one, can be used to justify further investigation, because now there's a reason to continue. Now, this doesn't mean you should become confrontational. It means you should understand the weight of your words, because once you answer that question, the direction of the stop often changes. Now, let's move to the fourth tactic. And this is the one most people recognize, but don't fully understand. Field sobriety tests. Would you step out of the vehicle? Can you walk this line for me? Follow this light with your eyes. These tests are presented as a way to clear things up. But here's the reality. They are designed to observe and document signs of impairment, balance, coordination, divided attention. And here's what most people don't realize. These tests are subjective. They depend on the officer's observations. Fatigue, stress, uneven ground, medical conditions, All of these can affect performance. But in the moment, people feel like they have to agree. They think refusing automatically makes them look guilty, so they comply, without understanding what they're stepping into. And once the tests begin, the situation has already escalated. Now let's talk about the fifth tactic, and this is where everything becomes more structured. The build-up to chemical testing. If the officer believes there's enough evidence, they may proceed toward breath or blood testing. But before that happens, they're often reinforcing their observations, repeating questions, confirming details, documenting behavior. Because every step is building a case. And here's something important to understand. By the time it reaches this stage, the decision-making process is already well underway. Now let's step back for a moment, because this is where everything connects. None of these tactics are random. They're part of a structured process, a progression from observation to questioning to testing to enforcement. And the reason most people struggle in these situations is simple. They don't realize when the shift happens. They think they're still in a casual interaction, when in reality, they're already in an investigation. So what makes the difference? Awareness, not aggression, not resistance. Awareness. Understanding that every question has a purpose, every observation has meaning, and every response contributes to the outcome. Now let's walk through a realistic scenario so you can see how this plays out in real time. You're driving late at night, you get pulled over. The officer approaches. "Hey, how's it going tonight?" You respond calmly. "Good evening, officer." They ask where you're coming from. Instead of explaining everything, you keep it simple. No extra details. They ask for your license. You provide it steadily, no sudden movements. No nervous rushing. Then comes the question, have you had anything to drink tonight? This is your moment. You understand that your answer matters. You stay calm, you don't panic, you don't over-explain. Now the officer observes your behavior, your tone, your consistency, and based on that, they decide what comes next. Maybe the stop stays limited, maybe it escalates. But here's the key difference. You didn't make it worse. You didn't give away more than necessary. You stayed in control. Now here's something I want you to really think about. Most people believe these situations are decided by what the officer does. But in reality, they're often influenced just as much by what the driver does. How they speak, how they move, how they respond under pressure. And that's why understanding these tactics matters. Not to beat the system, but to avoid making mistakes that can have long-term consequences. Because a DWI stop is not just a moment. It can affect your license, your record, your finances, your future. So, the goal is simple. Stay calm, stay aware, and don't walk into the process blindly, because once you recognize what's happening, you stop reacting emotionally. You start responding intentionally. And that alone can change everything about how the situation unfolds.